Hello everyone, today we are continuing Field Trips Always End Terribly, written by Itslivybear on AO3. This will be Chapter 9. Please God, let me have one good day. Reprise. Summary: the second half of the aftermath. Tomura's reaction and Izuku's realization. Tomura was having a pretty bad day, all things considered. Yesterday had been the day he was going to do Izu proud and finally heard that damn explosion brat. He had gotten more members for his party and he even had Stain on his side, who was sure to crush any of the fakes that tried to come up. Eraserhead, however, was really cool. Tomura didn't even want to kill him, and apparently this had been just the clue they needed to find the League base. Between him and the other heroes, God, Shitty All Might was there. He saw Izu flinch. They managed to do a lot of damage, but that was before Sensei had pulled them to the Nomu factory. And then he gave Izu a quirk. Tomura knew he didn't want it, and seeing that hand grab the boy's head had sent a spike of fear through Tomura. Every time Izu was near Sensei, he came back in pain. He screamed, this time being no exception, and stumbled away from Sensei on jelly legs, shaking profusely. He probably didn't even notice he was crying. When All Might came back, Izu didn't notice, still trying to focus, and Sensei told Tomura to leave. Perhaps in another life, he would have protested, wanting to stay and help Sensei, but he just looked at Izu and nodded. There were too many heroes. Izu was too hurt because of Sensei, and they needed to get out to fight another day. And then the brats they had captured made it out of their restraints and started attacking, like now was a great time to do so. More hero brats came out of the woodworks, and the three captives wasted no time grabbing on. Deku! Tomura's head shot up, glaring at the offender who dared call Izu by that insulting name, only to watch as Izu reached up to meet her hand, almost instinctively. He felt someone dragging him towards the portal and couldn't hear over the pounding in his ears, but he was sure he let out some strangled cry because Green Eyes met his, still so confused and teary, before they fluttered shut, the boy falling limp. For a moment, Tomura had hope. Without the grip on the girl, he would fall and they could sweep him up so he could keep his rogue, his friend. But then he got tugged along like he weighed nothing, being drawn into the group of people soaring through the air. Later, he would look at the profiles for the hero students and recognize the girl with the gravity quirk, knowing he really had weighed nothing. But that didn't take away the feeling of loss and anger. Kurogiri was the first to try and comfort him, seeing as he had known the boy the longest aside from Sensei. But really, what could he say? When your best friend had been taken from you after getting so very hurt at the hands of your father figure, the person who had treated him like normal for the first time ever, he couldn't even look at his hands, gloved as they were, without thinking of green eyes and soft, nervous smiles. The vanguard, noticeably Toga and Dabi, tried next. Toga bounced around, talking about how she could probably break in and steal someone's blood to get him back, about how if he needed a rogue, she was also good with knives, but he ignored her. Dabi said the heroes would break him and he'd be back, and Tomura actually pushed him away with a growl. He didn't want him to break. Finally, it was Stain who said something that seemed to get through to him. There are a few possibilities of what's going to happen with your little rogue. The serial killer had the attention of Tomura and everyone in the warehouse. 1. He lifted a finger. He'll run from the heroes and try to find us. He knows where my hunting grounds are for the next few kills, so if he wants to find us, he can. Tomura perked up at the possibility. However, the chances of that happening are slim. What? What do you mean? Tomura almost snarled. Stain raised an eyebrow, looking unimpressed. For one, he's likely on a hero guard, probably Eraserhead, so he's not going to get far. Tomura nodded, conceding the point. Eraserhead is good. 2. He lifted another finger. They will lock him up and assume he's a villain. Toga cocked her head. He isn't. Isn't he, though? No, Stain muttered. Keep up. 3. He lifted a final finger. He becomes a hero. Half the party is thrown into chaos, people scoffing or getting mad, but Tomura just looked contemplative. Red Eyes met Stain's. If anyone could do it, he could. The killer nodded, effectively cutting off all discourse. The boy will make a true hero, even if no one else will, even if we hadn't helped him on his way, showing him the difference between the real heroes and the fakes. He has Eraserhead for a teacher. Dobby folded his arms and rolled his eyes. You guys seem to hold this Eraserhead guy in high regards. He's a true hero, underground, fighting for good and not fame or money. Dobby pursed his lips, not quite believing it, but Spinner cheered. Good that the little rogue has a good teacher, then, if we can't be there to guide him on the right path. Tomura nodded. I still want him back, though. Stain scoffed, but it seemed amused. Of course. Training wasn't supposed to be fun. Granted, using the UA facilities and not being in that concrete box under the bar made the experience far nicer than it had any right to be, because there was light that came from the sun and not fluorescence. He got to fight against more than like Stain, and Aizawa was there to watch him. Sue him, he had missed his teacher. But UA made training different. Without the constant worry about villains and heroes, just being in school over the summer, knowing Sensei couldn't hurt him anymore. It was nice, and it was fun. Of course, voicing this to Aizawa did not have the reaction he had intended. You trained with Stain? And Tomura, he's just not as good with knife. So, him, with him I was learning other things. A single eyebrow arced up, such as pickpocketing? The tired teacher let out a breath. If that's it, then fine. Oh, he stood up straighter, scratching his neck with his free hand. I also learned a bit of stealth. Not a lot, but still, Tomura said any good rogue knows how to stealth, so he trailed off, getting uncomfortable and sad. Stealth, huh? Aizawa looked at him through narrowed eyes. Then here's an assignment for you. He reached into a pocket and pulled out his phone. The password is 2287. If you can successfully take this and replace the phone background, all without me noticing, I will consider you good on hero training. That doesn't feel very heroic. Kid, underground heroes are all about this kind of thing. I assume that's what you're aiming for? He nodded hesitantly. Good. The phone disappeared back into the fold of fabric, and Izuku didn't actually see any pockets, so he knew this was going to be hard. Right. Aizawa sat cross-legged on the ground, gesturing in front of him. Quirk. Sit down. Izuku folded his legs beneath him, nervous. I'm assuming you never went to a quirk counselor? He shook his head. Aizawa sighed, running a hand down his face. Technically, they're still supposed to send you, even if you're quirkless, but I guess they didn't. Not entirely sure what I expected. Right, anyway, since we don't know what your quirk is, and Izuku flinched at the word your, we're going to meditate. What do you know about the quirk already? Izuku pursed his lips. I think it's mental based. I felt something settled into my head, but that could have just been me freaking out. Oh, up. He looked up, eyes wide. Sensei said he had just gotten it. Aizawa's heart sank internally. He had a pretty good idea of what the quirk was now, thinking of a certain woman in the hospital, but he really didn't want to be right. Right, then meditation should be even more helpful. Try to reach out to that feeling you had. Izuku sat for several minutes, trying to regulate his breathing and think of nothing but finding this quirk. His mind devolved into thinking about the day in Camino, and he had to calm himself back down, trying to ignore where he had gotten this quirk, whatever it was. Then he felt that same tickling sensation. He paused, not sure if he really wanted this, but Aizawa's words from before, "You have it now," washed over him, and he set his jaw and reached. Almost instantly there was a flood of information in his brain, specifically about the man still sitting in front of him. Apparently, he was sitting exactly 5.5 feet, or 167 centimeters, away from him. His eyes were fairly irritated, which made sense based on his quirk, and his elbow was giving him trouble, the scar tissue pulling uncomfortably. His eyes flashed open with a gasp. I got it. It's a mental-based quirk that gives me information about people. I... He gulped, looking away. "I'm sorry your elbow still hurts." Aizawa stood up with a sigh, extending a hand to his student. "It's fine. It's not like you were the one to do it." As the man started walking out, Izuku hurried to follow after him. Where... where are we going?" "We're going to someone who can help you with your quirk." He bounced excitedly, wondering who it could be. Not many pros had mental quirk, but who was to say this person was a pro? Maybe it was an analyst? This did seem rather helpful for analysis, after all. It wasn't until they had arrived at the hospital that Izuku started to get a little confused. Aizawa had apparently called the person they were visiting ahead of time, letting them know of the situation. He had cast glances at Izuku the entire time he had made the call, keeping his voice quiet so the boy couldn't hear, but Izuku didn't mind. He was just excited to meet someone with a mental quirk. He had always found those the coolest. They went to the hero ward of the hospital, and Izuku found his excitement creeping back. Maybe it was someone who had helped in the raid. That wasn't too long ago. He had seen a lot of cool heroes there, and it would always be neat to meet new heroes. Aizawa opened the door and motioned him inside. It took him a moment to recognize who was in the hospital bed, but when he did, his eyes lit up. "Oh my gosh, you're Ragdoll of the Wild Wild Pussycats! You guys are one of the only hero team in existence, and you're rescue heroes! That's so cool! All of you have such fascinating quirks, which I guess is why we're here, but your quirk is so cool. You can find the location and weak point of any..." He looked back at Aizawa, realization and horror dawning on his face, before he turned back to look at Ragdoll. "Oh..." Her eyes brimmed with tears and she gave a bitter smile, opening her arms. "Oh, kitten!" His vision blurred as hot salty tears fell, and he stumbled over to the now quirkless pro-hero, muttering, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over again, while she just rubbed his back and sighed. "Oh, kitten." And there we go. So this was chapter 9 of Field Trips Always End Terribly. As always, I encourage you to go leave a kudos on the original fic. It's absolutely amazing. I had a great time reading this. The angst is ugh, juicy. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next chapter.